the 30th of October, 1993. Outside the Viper Room, the infamous nightclub on Sunset Strip, Los Angeles chaos erupted under the blinding flashes of paparazzi cameras. On the cold pavement lay a young man, motionless, eyes wide open as if refusing to believe what had just happened. He was no stranger. He was River Phoenix, Hollywood's brightest rising star, just 23 years old. Only hours earlier, River had been on stage with a guitar, smiling with that shy, effortless charm that made him seem like he belonged more to art than to fame. But just after midnight, his body collapsed, seized by a drug overdose, right in front of a horrified crowd and in front of his younger brother, Joaquin Phoenix, who frantically dialed 911, his trembling voice echoing in despair. The world was stunned. River Phoenix had been hailed as the next Marlon Brando, the golden face of a Hollywood desperate for new blood, raw, authentic, rebellious yet deeply human. But in one cruel moment, the promise of a generation was extinguished. What remained was a body on the sidewalk, a haunting silence, and a question that lingers to this day. Did Hollywood destroy River Phoenix, or did he burn too bright, too fast? The press called it the tragedy of a fallen angel, but the truth behind it was far darker, hidden beneath the glittering lights of fame, the toxic lure of excess, and the silent negligence of an industry that devours its young. But the truth behind it is much darker. River Jude Phoenix was born on the 23rd of August, 1970, in Madras, Oregon. His name itself carried the weight of myth and destiny. River, his mother said, symbolized the flowing energy of life, while Jude was inspired by the Beatles' song, Hey Jude. From the very beginning, River's life would be marked by movement, both physical and spiritual. His parents, John Lee Bottom and Arlen Hart Phoenix, were not part of ordinary America. They were drifters, seekers, dreamers, chasing a higher purpose. In the early 1972nd, they joined the controversial religious sect known as the Children of God. River and his siblings, Rain, Joaquin, Liberty, and Summer, were raised not in stability, but in mission houses, communes, and remote outposts scattered across the Americas. For a young boy, this meant an unconventional childhood. River spent part of his earliest years in Venezuela, where the family lived in poverty while preaching the sect's beliefs. There was no steady schooling, no traditional sense of home. Instead, music became his language. By the age of 3, River was already singing with a guitar, his voice so pure that strangers stopped to listen. His parents soon realized they had a prodigy on their hands. But behind the free-spirited image of nomadic life, darker truths simmered. The Children of God faced accusations of exploitation, manipulation, and practices that deeply scarred many of its young members. Though River rarely spoke in detail about his early experiences, close friends later recalled how fragments of trauma haunted him into adulthood. He was a child forced to witness the contradictions of love and control, faith and corruption, light and shadow. When his parents left the sect in the late 1972nd, the Phoenix family returned to the United States with nothing but a battered station wagon and a dream. They were broke, living in a trailer in Florida, struggling even to afford food. River and his siblings would often play guitar and sing on street corners to help put food on the table. In interviews years later, River admitted that hunger was a constant companion of his childhood. Sometimes, the only thing we had for dinner was popcorn. Yet it was during these years of hardship that River's artistic flame burned brightest. He was not just talented, he was magnetic. Casting agents began to notice this unusual boy with piercing blue eyes, an otherworldly presence that seemed far older than his years. At just 10, River landed small television roles, which soon pulled the family to Los Angeles. But if Los Angeles was the land of dreams, it was also the land of danger. River, already shaped by instability and sacrifice, was thrust into an industry notorious for chewing up young talent. He became the family's breadwinner, carrying the financial weight on his small shoulders. By 12, River was not just acting, he was supporting his parents and siblings, a responsibility far too heavy for any child. Despite the pressure, River embraced art with all his being. He studied acting as if it were a sacred ritual. When he auditioned, he didn't perform lines, he lived them. Directors quickly realized he had something rare, an unfiltered emotional honesty that could not be taught. River was not acting to be famous. He was acting to express, to heal, to make sense of the chaos of his life. This extraordinary intensity propelled him into films like Stand By Me, 1986, where his portrayal of Chris Chambers, a tough boy hiding deep vulnerability, mirrored his own hidden pain. Audiences didn't just see a performance, they saw truth. And in River Phoenix, Hollywood had found its brightest hope. But hidden beneath the applause, the seeds of tragedy had already been planted. Childhood scars, relentless pressure, and the fragile balance between purity and corruption would shape every step of his short journey. And soon, as River's fame began to rise, so too did the cracks in his fragile world. When River Phoenix first stepped onto a Hollywood set, it became immediately clear. This was not just another child actor chasing stardom. His performances carried a sincerity that made adults stop in their tracks. In the mid-1982nd, a wave of young talent flooded television and film, but River's name stood out. He wasn't merely reciting lines. He was embodying the vulnerability of youth with unsettling realism. His breakthrough came in 1986 with Rob Reiner's Stand By Me. Playing Chris Chambers, a boy hardened by abuse yet aching for redemption, River didn't just deliver a role, he delivered a confession. Critics marveled at his depth. Audiences were moved to tears. And River, at just 15, became the soul of a generation. The performance earned him comparisons to James Dean, a tragic parallel that would later prove hauntingly prophetic. The industry immediately recognized his range. Within 2 years, he was cast in Running on Empty, 1988, portraying the son of fugitive radicals who grows up constantly on the move. The role seemed tailor-made for him. River poured his own nomadic childhood into the character, and the result was devastating. For his performance, he received an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor at just 18. Overnight, River was transformed from child star to serious actor, one of the youngest ever to be recognized by the Academy. But with critical acclaim came crushing expectations. Hollywood loves prodigies, but it also devours them. Studios began marketing him as the new face of American cinema. His face graced magazine covers. Directors competed to secure his next role, yet River recoiled from fame. He lived in a small house with his family, refused the glitz of Hollywood parties, and spoke openly about vegetarianism, animal rights, and environmental activism. In an industry fueled by excess, River Phoenix seemed like an outsider prophet, a voice of conscience. Still, no one could ignore his star power. By 1989, Steven Spielberg handpicked him to play the young Indiana Jones in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Even alongside Harrison Ford, River's charisma lit up the screen. Ford himself later said that River had the rare ability to just be there, fully alive, fully present. It was the same raw quality that made audiences believe every second of his performances. During this meteoric rise, River's circle of influence grew. He became friends with fellow young actors like Keanu Reeves, Johnny Depp, and Ethan Hawke. To many, he seemed untouchable, talented, kind, politically aware, and admired by his peers. Rolling Stone once called him the most promising actor of his generation. Yet behind this glow, cracks began to appear. The pressure to deliver brilliance again and again was relentless. River was still a teenager, burdened with supporting his entire family financially. Every audition, every script choice carried not just artistic stakes, but survival for those he loved. In interviews, he often appeared shy, almost fragile, deflecting questions about fame, as though the weight of the spotlight was too much. Then came My Own Private Idaho, 1991, directed by Gus Van Sant. River played Mike Waters, a narcoleptic street hustler searching for love and belonging. It was a role few young stars would dare touch, risky, raw, and brutally intimate. But River embraced it with fearless vulnerability, even rewriting portions of the script to deepen his character's emotional truth. The result was groundbreaking. His performance was hailed as one of the greatest of the decade, cementing his reputation not just as a star, but as an artist. In private, however, Hollywood's temptations were creeping in. The late 1982nd and early 1992nd were marked by a culture of excess parties, drugs, and endless pressure disguised as glamour. River, who had once been a strict vegan and advocate of purity, began experimenting. Friends later admitted that the contrast between his public idealism and private struggles was stark. He wanted to live up to the image of a saintly figure, but was caught in the whirlwind of an industry that rewarded escape. By the early 92nd, River Phoenix had the world at his feet. Critics spoke of him as the heir to Brando and Dean. Directors praised his genius. Fans adored him. Yet River himself seemed uneasy, even trapped. He once told a reporter, "I don't want to play the game. I just want to work, to be true." But it's like the machine wants to eat you alive. That unease, that battle between purity and corruption, would soon intensify. As his career soared to new heights, River's hidden struggles grew darker, pulling him toward a destiny that neither he nor Hollywood could escape. As River Phoenix climbed the ladder of Hollywood acclaim, the industry's shadow began to stretch longer over him. The same streets that had celebrated his genius also introduced him to temptations that would gnaw at his soul. Sunset Strip, with its nightclubs, flashing cameras, and endless parties, was a playground for the young and famous, but also a trap for the unguarded. River tried to hold on to his ideals. A lifelong vegan, advocate for animal rights, and passionate about environmental causes, he often spoke publicly about the importance of conscious living. Yet the hypocrisy of Hollywood, the very machine that elevated him, was impossible to ignore. The pressure to perform, to maintain a pristine public image while navigating an undercurrent of drugs, excess, and morally ambiguous friends, created a tension that River struggled to release. By the early 1992nd, River had begun experimenting with substances not as a recreational habit, but as a way to cope with the overwhelming weight of expectation. Friends later described him as fiercely intelligent and deeply sensitive, qualities that made him particularly vulnerable to the highs and lows of fame. Those closest to him noticed a growing restlessness, a fragility masked behind calm blue eyes and a carefully controlled smile. Even his relationships were strained. River often gravitated toward people who shared his artistic passion, but not necessarily his caution. The allure of the Hollywood underground exclusive parties, Viper Room gatherings, and late-night circles of actors, musicians, and celebrities exposed him to an intoxicating mix of thrill and danger. He resisted at first, but over time, the lines between work, play, and escape blurred. River's closest friends noticed a paradox. He was both a purist and a wanderer. On one hand, he campaigned for clean living and social justice. On the other, he flirted with the same dark lifestyle he publicly condemned. Ethan Hawke, a lifelong friend, later recounted how River would lecture about the evils of addiction, yet struggle privately with the very temptations he warned against. The media, eager for scandal, often misrepresented these struggles. Headlines hinted at a wild side that River did not fully possess, creating an image he neither wanted nor could escape. Hollywood was simultaneously his stage and his cage, celebrating his brilliance while exploiting his vulnerabilities. Amid this chaos, River's artistic intensity never waned. He threw himself into roles with reckless honesty. My Own Private Idaho has solidified his reputation as a fearless actor, but the emotional toll was immense. He often reported feeling physically and spiritually drained after intense performances, yet he refused to compromise his standards. The more he gave to his art, the more hollow he sometimes felt in his personal life. Family remained his anchor, yet even that was strained by the industry's demands. River, Joaquin, and their siblings were expected to maintain composure while navigating contracts, appearances, and paparazzi. The world saw the Phoenix family as emblematic of wholesome Hollywood values, but behind closed doors, the pressure was suffocating. River carried responsibilities no 23-year-old should bear: financial support, public expectation, and the emotional burden of past trauma. By the fall of 1993, River Phoenix was walking a dangerous tightrope. Fame, pressure, addiction, and emotional fragility converged in a perfect storm. The vibrant, prodigious young actor whose name had inspired hope now teetered on the edge of a world he had never truly belonged to, a world that would, tragically, claim him too soon. And then came the 30th of October, the night that would transform Hollywood's bright promise into a cautionary tale. It was a cool autumn night on the 30th of October, 1993, and the streets of Los Angeles were buzzing with neon lights and music spilling from Sunset Strip's nightclubs. Among the throng of partygoers, River Phoenix made his way toward the Viper Room, the hot spot recently bought by actor Johnny Depp. Known for its exclusive guest list and underground allure, it had become a magnet for Hollywood's young stars, musicians, and industry elites. River, always conscious of his image yet drawn to the thrill of the scene, arrived with a mix of curiosity and caution. He had been sober for most of his life, disciplined in his diet and lifestyle, yet the pressures of fame, exhaustion from constant work, and his restless spirit made him vulnerable to temptation. That night, friends would later say River felt both exhilarated and strangely fatigued, a precarious balance that would soon tip. Inside the club, the atmosphere was intoxicating. The bass of the music reverberated through the walls, smoke lingered in the dimly lit space, and laughter mingled with whispered deals. River mingled with familiar faces, chatted with musicians, and sipped drinks, but the line between celebration and danger was already blurred. Moments later, the night turned irreversible. Witnesses recall seeing River stumble toward the exit, moving past the velvet ropes and into the crisp night air. Minutes later, his body collapsed onto the sidewalk outside. Panic erupted. Bystanders rushed to him. Friends screamed for help. Joaquin Phoenix, his younger brother, dialed 911-inch desperation, shouting for assistance as River lay motionless, his breathing shallow and labored. Paramedics arrived within minutes, but the damage was already done. River Phoenix was pronounced dead outside the Viper Room at just 2-3 years old. The cause: acute multiple drug intoxication, a lethal cocktail of cocaine and heroin. The news spread like wildfire. Headlines screamed of a fallen angel, a bright star extinguished, and a Hollywood that had lost one of its most promising talents. The world mourned. Fans gathered in vigils, leaving flowers and notes outside the club. Tributes poured in from actors, directors, and musicians. Ethan Hawke later reflected, "River was the kind of person who could light up a room with just his presence, and then break your heart by leaving it too soon." But the tragedy was more than the immediate loss. River's death exposed the darker undercurrents of Hollywood, the intersection of fame, exploitation, and vulnerability. Here was a young man, raised with ideals, disciplined in his art, and compassionate toward the world, swallowed by the very culture that once celebrated him. The juxtaposition of talent and destruction, innocence and excess, created a story that haunted the industry for decades. To many, River Phoenix's death became symbolic of a broader warning. Even the brightest lights can burn out when surrounded by shadows too deep to navigate alone. In life, he had charmed, inspired, and led. In death, he became a cautionary tale, a symbol of what Hollywood could both give and take away. Even today, his legacy lingers: films, photographs, and memories that capture not just his talent, but the profound tragedy of a life interrupted too soon. River Phoenix was gone, but the questions remained. Could this have been prevented? Was he a victim of circumstance, or did the intensity of his own nature push him toward the edge? Hollywood had gained a legend, but at a cost that would echo forever. River Phoenix may have left the world too soon, but his presence continues to reverberate through cinema, culture, and the hearts of those who knew him. In just 23 years, he transformed the meaning of youthful brilliance in Hollywood. He proved that a child of hardship could rise to global acclaim, that talent could be raw, unpolished, and yet utterly magnetic. His films, Stand By Me, Running on Empty, My Own Private Idaho, remain testaments to his ability to convey vulnerability, pain, and unspoken truth. Modern actors often cite River as a source of inspiration, a standard for authenticity and dedication. Directors marvel at his intuition, the way he inhabited characters with an emotional honesty few could match. In every frame, River was not performing, he was living. Beyond the screen, River's moral compass and activism left an indelible mark. He championed animal rights, advocated for environmental causes, and inspired countless fans to think critically about the world around them. He brought conscience to Hollywood, a reminder that fame need not erase compassion. Friends and family describe him as fiercely loyal, deeply empathetic, and unafraid to challenge the status quo, qualities that elevated him beyond celebrity. Yet the tragedy of his early death remains inseparable from his legend. River Phoenix serves as both a cautionary tale and a symbol of potential unfulfilled. His story forces reflection on Hollywood itself, the pressures, the temptations, and the vulnerability of its brightest stars. It reminds us that talent alone cannot shield a person from the corrosive effects of fame, exhaustion, and exposure to vice. And yet, amid heartbreak, hope persists. River's life encourages us to value authenticity over image, to fight for ideals in a world often indifferent to them, and to remember that even fleeting brilliance can leave a lasting light. His artistry, kindness, and courage continue to influence actors, fans, and dreamers who see in him the possibility of living and creating with intensity and truth. In the end, River Phoenix's legacy is dual: a dazzling reminder of what talent can achieve, and a somber reflection on the cost of Hollywood's unforgiving spotlight. We remember the films, the activism, and the boy from Madras, Oregon who dared to live fully, love deeply, and challenge an industry that was never ready for him. And in remembering him, we ask ourselves a quiet, haunting question: how many more River Phoenixes might the world lose before we truly learn the cost of fame?